Right after high school you started playing together?
Yes, sir, that's right.
Your big hit right from the start, or has it been sort of a long...
Well, we've had...
Ed Sullivan dropped a bombshell. He secretly kept a list of 9 Golden Age stars he wished he'd never put on his famous stage because of their racism. For 23 years, Ed wasn't just a TV host. He was the kingmaker of American entertainment. Every Sunday night, over 50 million people tuned in to The Ed Sullivan Show, where unknown talents turned into overnight legends. This wasn't just television, it was history in motion. The show shaped pop culture, defined eras, and gave us household names that still echo today. If Ed booked you, one former producer said, America knew your name by morning. That's how much power he had, and he guarded it like a vault. But that power came with a price. Away from the bright lights, Ed kept a secret notebook filled with more than performance notes. His longtime stage manager said he wrote down everything that happened backstage, especially when things got ugly. Sometimes after a performance, he'd quietly tell his staff, "That's the last time they're on my stage." And it wasn't ego or attitude that pushed him over the edge. It was straight-up racism. He witnessed singers demanding segregated dressing rooms, artists who copied black music but refused to share the same stage, and family-friendly icons hiding ugly beliefs behind those Hollywood smiles. It shook him to his core. The worst part? Some of these people were America's favorites. There was the squeaky clean crooner who made millions off songs stolen from black musicians while publicly rejecting integration. Then there was the so-called patriotic hero who'd belt out racist songs backstage right between his renditions of God Bless America. And don't forget the cowboy idol who preached fairness to kids on TV but ran a segregated business behind closed doors. And at the top of the list, the one that haunted Ed the most. The young man he gave 3 legendary performances to, the very appearances that launched him as the king. His entire sound came from black musical traditions, yet those close to him revealed a darker truth. Behind the charm and swagger, his private views left Ed absolutely stunned. Every time Sullivan introduced one of these stars, 50 million Americans watched, and that's what broke him inside. He knew his stage gave them power, visibility, and legitimacy. That guilt followed him for years. But before we reach the king, let's talk about number 9, the singer who fooled the whole country with his clean-cut charm while quietly profiting from others' creativity. Number 9, Pat Boone, the all-American boy who built his fame by stealing from black artists and openly standing against integration. When Boone stepped onto Ed's stage, he was marketed as the picture of good manners and white picket fence perfection. With his spotless shoes, polite grin, and buttoned-up style, he looked like the safe choice for nervous parents afraid of dangerous rock and roll. Ed even introduced him as the calm alternative to Elvis Presley's wild energy. But behind that perfect smile was a cold business move. Boone's entire empire was based on softening up songs by black musicians, turning their raw emotion into sanitized hits for white radio. While he stacked millions, the real creators barely got recognition, let alone royalties. Between 1955 and 1959, Boone kept the hits rolling, covering tracks like Ain't That a Shame by Fats Domino, Tutti Frutti, and Long Tall Sally by Little Richard, all masterpieces originally born from black talent. His record label had it down to a formula. They'd monitor what black artists were releasing, rush Boone into the studio, and flood radio with his clean-cut imitations. It was a system built on erasing authenticity for profit, and Ed never forgot it. Little Richard never forgot the sting of it. He once admitted that seeing Pat Boone's watered-down version of Tutti Frutti climb the charts while his own masterpiece got ignored broke his heart. Pat made my songs into nursery rhymes, Richard said. He took everything that made them alive and turned them into something safe for white people. That cut deep. It wasn't just about money, it was about respect. What made it even worse was Boone's open stance against integration. Imagine that, making a fortune off black creativity while publicly standing against equality. In the late 1950s, he didn't just stay silent. He backed segregationist ideas. One moment on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1958 exposed everything. When Ed planned to feature a black performer on the same episode as Boone, Boone's team made it clear they didn't want him sharing the screen on an integrated show. Ed was furious yet controlled, the kind of anger that burned quietly. His wife Sylvia later revealed that during Boone's performance that night, Ed stood just off stage, shaking his head the whole time, realizing how fake Boone's wholesome image really was. That night changed how Ed saw fame. It proved that charm could hide cruelty. Boone never once apologized or gave credit to the artists whose sound he built his name on. Instead, he hid behind his polished Christian persona, all while his business kept cashing in on exploitation. His so-called family-friendly image wasn't clean at all. It was built on taking from others and disguising it as decency. That spotless smile was a mask, and Sullivan saw through it. Ed later called Boone's appearances one of his biggest mistakes, a painful reminder that even the brightest stars can cast the darkest shadows. But Boone wasn't the only one who fooled the nation. Next up, number 8, Kate Smith, the woman who once embodied American pride but whose voice carried a chilling secret hidden behind her most patriotic songs. Kate Smith, the voice that made God Bless America a second national anthem. Her booming, emotional performances stirred hearts across the country, and on Sullivan's stage, she was treated like living Americana. He often introduced her with pride, calling her the voice of the nation. But behind that powerful voice was a disturbing past that history couldn't hide forever. Decades later, recordings unearthed a dark truth. Back in 1931, Smith recorded That's Why Darkies Were Born, a song that romanticized slavery and twisted racial oppression into something natural. Even worse, archives revealed she performed similar songs throughout the 1930s with lyrics that mocked black pain for applause. Old radio transcripts and newspaper reviews showed she even performed in blackface on early broadcasts, a fact many fans never knew. It wasn't just one mistake, it was a pattern. What really horrified Ed Sullivan wasn't just what she'd done decades ago. It was how little she changed afterward. Even as America began to shift during the civil rights era, Smith clung to her old ways. A 1956 civil rights report detailed her canceling an entire concert rather than performing before an integrated audience. That shook Ed to the core. And when she came back to the Ed Sullivan Show, her team arrived with a list of demands. No integrated seating, no black musicians, no black backup singers. She wanted nothing on stage that challenged her traditions. It was a slap in the face to everything Ed was trying to evolve toward. In one particularly tense 1960 taping, stagehands remembered Smith refusing to even perform if black crew members were visible near the set. By then, Sullivan had started showcasing more black talent, jazz stars, gospel singers, young rhythm and blues acts, to reflect the changing times. But Kate Smith's strict rules clashed hard with that vision. Ed would always say, "She sings about America, but she only means part of it," Sylvia Sullivan revealed years later. That line said it all. Ed couldn't stand the hypocrisy. The woman who was celebrated as the nation's voice didn't stand for everyone. When Kate Smith's racist recordings resurfaced in 2019, people were stunned. The public couldn't believe that the same woman who symbolized patriotic pride had such a well-documented history of segregation and racial exclusion. Though Ed never knew about those exact recordings, he'd already seen the truth in person, her backstage behavior, her strict anti-integration demands, and her cold indifference left him regretting ever giving her that spotlight. Her version of patriotism looked pure, but it was poisoned by prejudice. She waved the flag while shutting out millions who were part of the very nation she claimed to love. Ed saw that clearly, and it haunted him every time her voice rang out as America's song, knowing deep down she didn't mean all of America. And that brings us to number 7, another beloved figure hiding discrimination behind a polished image, Perry Como. The man known as Mr. Nice Guy seemed gentle, calm, and endlessly kind. His soft voice could relax an entire nation, and Ed himself once called him television's perfect gentleman. But beneath that easygoing charm, Como kept a quiet wall of exclusion that lasted for years. His TV show ran from 1948 to 1963, right through the heart of the civil rights era, and guess what? According to old NBC diversity records, it featured almost no black performers at all. No guest singers, no musicians, not even background talent. His stage was spotless and strictly segregated. Internal NBC files later revealed that Perry Como personally approved every song, every arrangement, and every guest who appeared on his show. Multiple proposals in the 1950s for talented black musicians were submitted. Each one met the same fate, rejected. A 1957 memo from his own music director laid it bare. When the director suggested using integrated backup singers for a Christmas special, Como reportedly said his audience expected a certain kind of show and that integrated performers might make viewers uncomfortable. Imagine that. America's favorite gentleman protecting an all-white image while smiling into the camera. Promoters who booked his live tours backed it up too. Several contracts from the early 1960s explicitly required all-white orchestras and backup singers. One 1962 touring agreement spelled it out word for word. No black musicians allowed. It was written policy. On the Ed Sullivan Show, some crew members started to notice the cracks in Perry's charm. Stagehands said he'd get visibly uneasy whenever black performers were part of the same episode lineup. One longtime stage manager even recalled Como carefully timing his entrances and exits so he wouldn't cross paths with them backstage. That's how deep his discomfort ran. Sullivan caught on fast, and he didn't ignore it. Sometimes Ed would purposely book Como on the same night as groundbreaking black artists, just to watch how he'd react. And according to producers, Perry always kept his composure in front of the cameras. But the moment the lights dimmed, his body language told a different story. The tension was obvious to everyone working behind the scenes. What made it all sting even more was that Perry Como's entire musical style was built on the rhythm, tone, and soul of black jazz and blues traditions. His signature sound, the very thing that made him famous, came from the art he refused to stand beside. Yet not once did he give public credit or show open support for the black artists who inspired him. While Perry Como's racism was quiet and polished, the next star's was loud, proud, and built right into his empire. Number 6, Lawrence Welk, the ever-smiling band leader who hid exclusion behind a cloud of bubbles and polite polkas. When Lawrence Welk appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, America saw a cheerful man with a heavy accent and that soft, old-fashioned charm. His champagne music was sold as sweet, clean, and wholesome. Perfect family entertainment. Sullivan would beam as he introduced him as the man whose music brings everyone together. But behind that happy-go-lucky image sat a rule that defined Welk's career for more than 3 decades. No black musicians allowed. Ever. From 1951 all the way to 1982, over 30 years of weekly national television, Welk's orchestra stayed completely segregated. Not a single black performer was ever hired. Musicians who auditioned remembered it vividly. One black trumpet player who tried out in 1965 said he was told straight up, "Mr. Welk prefers to keep the orchestra traditional." He knew exactly what that coded language meant. Whites only. And this wasn't some quiet oversight, it was a full-blown policy. Welk ran his band like a private club, keeping the door locked for anyone who didn't fit his look. What made it worse was how long it went on. Even as the civil rights movement reshaped America, his orchestra stayed stuck in a 1950s fantasy. Smiling faces, matching suits, and not a single hint of diversity in sight. To millions watching at home, it all looked innocent. Sparkling smiles, perfect choreography, polite applause. But behind that perfectly packaged image was an invisible wall that defined his entire show. Ed Sullivan started to notice it, and it didn't sit right with him. As the late 1950s and 60s rolled in, television began to change. Other variety shows cautiously began to integrate, giving more opportunities to black artists and musicians. But Lawrence Welk, he refused to budge. His all-white orchestra rule stood firm, untouched by the world evolving around him. NBC's internal diversity reports flagged his show repeatedly as one of the least inclusive on television. But Welk never changed a thing. Former band members would later admit that everyone behind the scenes knew what was going on. Welk personally approved every single hire, and nobody dared to question it. Larry wanted a certain look, one former musician said, and black performers didn't fit that look. It wasn't whispered. It was understood. When Welk's orchestra appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, the contrast was impossible to miss. Ed's stage was becoming more inclusive by the early 1960s, featuring black jazz legends, soul singers, and groundbreaking dancers. Meanwhile, Welk's spotless, all-white ensemble looked frozen in time. A 1964 backstage story summed it up perfectly. When Welk arrived for rehearsal, he reportedly looked around and commented that Ed's orchestra looked different from what he was used to. That polite little remark carried a sting everyone caught. It was his way of throwing shade without saying the word integrated. Sullivan's producers later said Ed actually used Welk as an example in staff meetings about inclusion, a real-life warning about what not to do. He admired talent, but not blindness to progress. What frustrated Ed most was that Lawrence Welk didn't even think he was doing anything wrong. He wasn't hiding his segregation, it was just business to him. He genuinely believed that keeping his orchestra traditional made it wholesome and safe for viewers. Lawrence Welk passed away in 1992, still smiling, still praised, and never once admitting that keeping black musicians off his stage for over 30 years was wrong. His public image stayed spotless, remembered as the gentle, polite band leader who made America feel good. But those glowing obituaries skipped the truth. They ignored the discrimination baked into his legacy. To Ed Sullivan, Welk's story was proof that racism didn't always wear a scowl. Sometimes it wore a tuxedo, held a baton, and called itself family entertainment. But Welk's quiet segregation wasn't even the oldest name on Ed's regret list. Next came someone from an even earlier, darker chapter of American showbiz. Number 5, Sophie Tucker. The fiery vaudeville queen whose fame was partly built on blackface acts that history tried to forget. When Sophie Tucker appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show in the 1950s and early 60s, audiences saw her as a legend from another era. Nicknamed the last of the Red Hot Mamas, she was treated like royalty, living proof of vaudeville's golden age. Ed introduced her with genuine admiration, calling her a trailblazer who had paved the way for generations of entertainers. But there was a dark truth hiding behind that applause. Most viewers had no idea that Tucker's early career leaned heavily on racist stage traditions. Historians had documented it for decades, how her fame first exploded through blackface performances and borrowed black musical styles she never gave credit for. Records trace her blackface acts all the way back to the early 1900s, and she didn't stop until the 1920s. Back then, theater managers told her she didn't have the right look to be a star, so they pushed her to use blackface makeup, saying it would make audiences focus on her voice instead of her appearance, and she went along with it, building her brand on a disguise that mocked the very culture she stole from. Even in her own 1945 autobiography, Tucker talked openly about those acts as if they were nothing unusual. She described the costumes, the jokes, the routines, all without a hint of guilt. To her, it was just another role in show business. But to Ed Sullivan, once he learned the truth, it became painfully clear. By celebrating her without context, he'd helped sugarcoat one of the ugliest parts of entertainment history. Sophie Tucker never saw blackface as wrong. In interviews, she even called it stage makeup, treating it like any other prop or wig. She didn't seem to grasp, or maybe didn't want to, that what she called tradition had humiliated and excluded real black performers for generations. What made her story sting even more was how her entire sound came from black artistry. She studied the jazz and blues styles of black women singers, copied their phrasing, their tone, their emotional delivery, and then rebranded it as her own act for white audiences who wouldn't dare attend the original shows. She got rich performing versions of their music in blackface, while the real pioneers stayed invisible. People who worked with her described that imbalance clearly. Her collaborations with black musicians were often one-sided. They brought the rhythm and soul. She took the credit and the spotlight. One black pianist who toured with her in the 1930s said she flat out took credit for his song arrangements, claiming them as her own creations when reporters asked. She built her fame on their artistry while treating them like background players in her story. By the time Sophie Tucker appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, she had long retired the blackface act, but her mindset hadn't evolved much. She was still rooted in the old showbiz hierarchy, where race determined who got the glory and who stayed behind the curtain. A chilling story from 1959 exposed just how little she'd changed. Backstage before a taping, Tucker saw a young black singer waiting nervously to perform. According to a stage report, she turned to someone nearby and said, "In my day, that girl wouldn't have been allowed back here, and maybe that was better because everyone knew their place." That one sentence said everything. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was entitlement, a reminder of how some stars from the old guard clung to their past prejudice like it was part of their legacy. That one line from Sophie Tucker hit the Sullivan team like a slap in the face. By the late 50s, Ed had made it his mission to open doors for black performers and bring real diversity to primetime television. So hearing Tucker brush off all that progress with a smug remark about knowing their place completely shattered his nostalgia for the old vaudeville scene. Producers later said that was the moment Ed's admiration turned into quiet disappointment. He finally saw how deep those old attitudes ran. Her last appearance came in 1963, just 2 years before she passed away. Ed stayed professional as always, smiling on camera and giving her the respect due to a veteran. But behind the scenes, he made up his mind. That would be her final time on the Ed Sullivan Show. He no longer wanted to lend his stage to stars who carried yesterday's prejudice into a new era. Sophie Tucker became, in Ed's eyes, the living symbol of showbiz's openly racist beginnings, a reminder that the industry had built its foundations on exclusion and appropriation. But soon, he realized that prejudice didn't end with vaudeville or jazz. It had just learned to hide better. Even the rebellious sound of rock and roll, the genre hailed as revolutionary, had its own dirty secrets. Number 4. The Rolling Stones, the so-called rebels who shouted freedom on stage while quietly enforcing segregation behind it. When the Rolling Stones first hit the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, America went wild. They were raw, loud, and dangerous, young Brits channeling the spirit of American blues. Mick Jagger raved about his admiration for Muddy Waters, and Keith Richards often called black blues players his teachers. They even named their band after a Muddy Waters song. Everything about their act screamed love for black culture. But behind the curtain, the story changed fast. According to Sullivan's longtime staff, what happened backstage told a whole different truth. During their 1965 appearance, the band's management sent in a special request. They only wanted white staff working in their dressing rooms. That single demand caused major tension. By then, Sullivan's backstage crew was one of the most integrated in television. Black and white stagehands, makeup artists, and assistants working side by side. Staff members remembered the uncomfortable silence that fell when word spread that the blues-loving Stones didn't want black workers near their dressing rooms. It was a painful contradiction. The band that claimed to honor black music quietly enforcing segregation behind closed doors. What made it worse was how perfectly they played the part in public. On stage, they preached admiration for black legends. Off stage, they drew invisible lines that excluded them. It was hypocrisy wrapped in rebellion. Then came the interviews that really exposed their mindset. In 1965, Melody Maker published an article quoting Mick Jagger making crude remarks about black neighborhoods, throwing around stereotypes that stunned readers. When black British musicians called him out, Jagger shrugged it off as just observations. No apology, no accountability, just arrogance. Keith Richards wasn't innocent either. His supposed praise for black musicians often came out sounding patronizing, saying things like they had natural rhythm or an instinctive feel for music, as if their genius was just biology and not brilliance. Statements like that turned admiration into condescension. For Ed Sullivan, it was a wake-up call he didn't see coming. He'd given them one of their biggest early American platforms, millions of viewers, live exposure, and credibility that helped cement their superstardom. But seeing how they treated the very culture they built their fame on left him deeply disturbed. The harsh irony cut deep. The Rolling Stones had built an empire off the blues, the same music pioneered by artists like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Little Walter. Yet those men were barely making ends meet while the Stones were becoming millionaires. The band even took their name from Muddy Waters' song, but when it came time to lift others up, they left the real legends behind. Even worse, during their southern U.S. tours in the mid-1960s, the Rolling Stones performed at segregated venues and said nothing about it. They didn't enforce the rules themselves, but they didn't challenge them either. For a band that claimed to worship black music, that silence spoke louder than any guitar riff. Ed Sullivan grew more uneasy with every appearance they made. Sure, the ratings were massive. Millions of viewers tuned in whenever the Stones took the stage. But backstage, Ed couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. How could he celebrate a band that praised black culture so loudly in interviews, yet stayed quiet when it actually mattered? The contradiction ate at him. And just when Ed thought he'd seen it all, his next discovery hit even harder. This time, it wasn't a rock band or a swaggering performer. It was Hollywood royalty herself. Number 3, Judy Garland, America's sweetheart. Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, the voice that sang Over the Rainbow and brought millions to tears. On camera, she was delicate and damaged, a tragic survivor of studio abuse and addiction. Ed treated her with tenderness and admiration, introducing her as a symbol of strength and resilience. But behind the curtain, Judy Garland's behavior revealed another, darker side, one that stunned even her biggest supporters. The truth was painful. The same woman who moved audiences with her emotion could also be cutting and cruel, especially toward the black artists and musicians who worked beside her. Garland's relationship with legendary singer Lena Horne exposed a pattern Ed couldn't ignore. Judy often praised Lena's talent in public interviews, calling her one of the finest voices in the business. But behind closed doors, she never lifted a finger to help Horn get equal treatment. MGM's old studio records showed that Garland had final approval over marketing materials, and she never used that power to fight for fair billing or equal credit. Her compliments sounded hollow once you saw what she didn't do. Things got even uglier when stories from her touring musicians started surfacing. Memoirs from the 1960s painted a disturbing picture. Several band members said that when Judy was stressed or under the influence, she'd lash out, and sometimes those outbursts included racial slurs. One pianist from her 1964 tour recalled her tossing out offensive remarks during rehearsals like it was nothing, not even realizing or caring who she was hurting. To the public, Judy Garland was the ultimate symbol of innocence, the little girl who sang her heart out and suffered under Hollywood's harsh system. But to the people who shared her stage, she could be unpredictable and at times openly insulting. Ed Sullivan, who had adored her since her early days, was devastated when he learned how she'd treated some of the very musicians who helped bring her performances to life. Her touring crew back then was integrated, a rarity for the time, but her behavior created real tension on the road. Some band members later said she didn't even seem aware of how cruel her words were. Others believed she simply didn't care, knowing those she insulted didn't have the power to speak up without risking their jobs. And that indifference showed in her television work, too. On the Judy Garland Show, 1963 to 64, she had total creative control. But the guest list told its own story. While other variety shows were bringing in diverse performers, Garland's program stayed mostly white. The few black artists who appeared were rarely given real screen time, just quick performances with no recurring roles or sketches, leaving them sidelined on a show that could have used its platform for change. For Ed Sullivan, it was another crushing reminder that fame didn't equal fairness. He'd once seen Garland as a symbol of resilience, but behind the stage lights, he saw something different, an artist repeating the same patterns of exclusion that haunted the industry from the start. Then came the nightclub scandal that shattered Ed Sullivan's faith for good. It was 1967, inside a packed New York venue, when Judy Garland stunned everyone in the room. Witnesses, both staff and audience, said she suddenly turned on a group of black patrons she thought were being disruptive, hurling offensive remarks that left the crowd frozen in disbelief. The betrayal hit hard. Garland wasn't just another performer. She'd become a symbol of survival, of empathy, of defiance against cruelty. Entire communities, especially those who knew the pain of being marginalized, looked to her as a beacon of hope. To see her act with that kind of disregard cut deep. It proved that personal suffering doesn't always teach compassion. She could sing about heartbreak and human struggle on stage, then turn around and show her own blind prejudice off it. When the reports reached Sullivan, he was devastated. At first, he refused to believe a word of it. He'd always seen Judy as fragile, misunderstood, and deserving of kindness. He'd defended her countless times against gossip and press attacks. But when multiple witnesses from his own staff confirmed the story, each describing the same moment, Ed couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The woman he'd spent years trying to protect had done harm of her own. When Garland died in 1969, the world wept. Her obituaries painted her as the ultimate tragic star, a victim of fame, addiction, and a ruthless Hollywood system. But they barely mentioned the ugly incidents that left her colleagues and fans heartbroken. To Ed Sullivan, it was another harsh lesson. Even the brightest stars can hide the darkest flaws. And yet, the next name on his private list took hypocrisy to an even higher level. Number 2, Gene Autry, the beloved singing cowboy who built an entire empire on the image of justice, kindness, and honor, while quietly running one of the most segregated entertainment networks in America. When Gene Autry rode onto the Ed Sullivan Show, he looked every inch the American hero. The spotless hat, the golden voice, the cowboy code, he was the very picture of goodness and decency. Sullivan introduced him as a true symbol of American values. But behind that wholesome image, Autry's business dealings told a very different story. Gene Autry wasn't just a singer or actor, he was a media powerhouse. From the 1940s through the 1970s, he owned radio stations, a TV production company, and a nationwide rodeo circuit. But hidden deep in those business records were rules that revealed who he really was behind the cowboy charm. Archived company memos and internal playlists showed that Autry's radio stations explicitly banned songs by black artists. A 1952 memo spelled it out in black and white. Music by black performers would not be aired, no matter how big the hit. While rock and soul were reshaping the country, Autry's airwaves stayed frozen in the past, an all-white fantasy disguised as family entertainment. And his TV shows, the same pattern, hundreds of episodes, endless cowboys and sheriffs, but not one black actor in a speaking role. Production notes revealed that Autry personally approved every single casting decision. Former staff said it was an open secret. Everyone knew Gene wanted things traditional, one assistant explained, and traditional meant white. Even his rodeo empire followed suit. When his events toured the South, the seating was segregated wherever local laws allowed, and Autry never once spoke out against it. While some artists refused to perform under those conditions, he went right along with the system. His management enforced separate arrangements at every stop, all while Autry kept preaching about fairness and equality to the kids watching at home. That contradiction made Sullivan furious. Here was a man who built his fame on teaching honesty and respect, singing songs about helping others and doing what's right. Yet behind the curtain, he upheld the same exclusion he claimed to stand against. To Ed, that wasn't just hypocrisy. It was betrayal wrapped in a 10-gallon hat. Gene Autry had turned the cowboy code into a cover for discrimination, and he never seemed to see the problem. Worse still, the more Sullivan dug into the record, the clearer it became that this wasn't accidental. Autry's empire didn't just go along with segregation, it profited from it. Keeping his shows and stations traditional wasn't about nostalgia. It was business. He catered to audiences who wanted the comfort of an all-white fantasy world, and he gave it to them without hesitation. A 1956 housing report exposed another side of Gene Autry that few fans ever saw. When asked to support integrated neighborhoods near his real estate holdings, he flat out refused. His excuse: he said he was just protecting property values, a phrase civil rights leaders immediately recognized as coded racism. It wasn't about money. It was about keeping the old divisions alive while pretending it was just business sense. And that mindset didn't stop there. When Autry bought the California Angels baseball team in 1961, his quiet segregation followed him right into Major League Baseball. Under his ownership, the Angels quickly earned a reputation as one of the least diverse teams in the league. Black players who later spoke out described the atmosphere as unwelcoming and frozen in the past. Even talented athletes who made the roster found themselves sidelined or overlooked. The pattern was impossible to miss. Autry's version of all-American fairness had invisible boundaries. For Ed Sullivan, discovering all this was crushing. He'd grown up idolizing Gene Autry, the cowboy with a guitar, riding through movie screens singing about honesty, kindness, and doing what's right. To find out that same man was quietly running an empire built on exclusion, that betrayal stung like nothing else. In private, Ed would often bring up Autry's name when talking about Hollywood's hypocrisy, how the same people who preached justice and morality on screen could hide so much discrimination behind the scenes. He once told a producer that Gene Autry taught kids to do right but built his fortune doing wrong. It became one of his go-to examples whenever he talked about how image and truth rarely matched in show business. When Gene Autry passed away in 1998, the headlines were glowing. Obituaries called him a legend, a pioneer, a symbol of America's golden age. They praised his movies, his music, even his baseball legacy, but conveniently skipped over the pattern of racial exclusion that ran through everything he built. To Ed Sullivan, it was another painful example of America's selective memory, celebrating the myth and burying the truth. But as much as Autry's hypocrisy disgusted him, Ed's number one regret cut even deeper, because this next name wasn't just another star. He was the biggest booking of Ed's entire career, and his greatest mistake. Number one, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, hailed as a musical revolutionary, but haunted by the truth that his fame was built on stolen sound and racist beliefs. When Elvis first stepped onto the Ed Sullivan Show on September 9, 1956, the world stopped to watch. Over 60 million people tuned in, nearly the entire country. It became one of the most watched broadcasts in television history. Ironically, Ed had once sworn he'd never book Elvis, calling his stage act too wild and inappropriate, but public demand was too big to ignore. So he gave in. That single decision launched Elvis into superstardom and sealed his title as the King. But behind the flash, Ed didn't know the full story, that the man he helped crown had built his entire image and sound on music born from black artistry, while privately holding racist attitudes toward the very people who shaped it. Elvis's entire style came from black culture. The rhythm, the swagger, the sound, all borrowed from the gospel, blues, and R&B that had been flourishing long before his first hit. He learned gospel harmonies in black Memphis churches, picked up his stage moves from black performers on Beale Street, and recorded songs first performed by black musicians who never got the same credit or pay. Rock and roll didn't start with Elvis. It came from the soul of black America, but he became the one who cashed in on it. Those who worked around him noticed the contradiction immediately. Elvis praised black music publicly when it suited his image, but behind closed doors, witnesses described a different man. Several people close to his early tours recalled hearing him make derogatory remarks about black artists, comments that reduced them to stereotypes or brushed off their influence entirely. He adored the sound but ignored the people. He imitated the culture but never truly respected it. For Ed Sullivan, who had introduced Elvis to 60 million viewers, that realization cut deep. He hadn't just showcased an artist. He'd helped elevate a symbol of cultural theft wrapped in charm and charisma. Elvis Presley might have been the king, but to Ed Sullivan, he became the crown jewel of regret. The reminder that even the biggest stars could build their empires on the backs of those history refused to see. Ed Sullivan once called Elvis Presley the future of music. But as the years went on, that admiration turned to deep regret. The more he learned, the more he saw how much of Elvis's empire was built on borrowed sound, and how little respect he gave to the people who created it. The man who made millions from black music reportedly saw those artists not as equals or collaborators, but as resources, inspiration to profit from, not people to honor. It wasn't just cultural borrowing, it was cultural erasure dressed up in charisma. Elvis would later deny ever saying racist things, but countless musicians in Memphis remembered hearing comments, if not directly from him, then from the people closest to him. One thing everyone agreed on: he never went out of his way to publicly credit the black artists who shaped his sound or to use his fame to lift them up. Sam Phillips, the producer who first discovered Elvis, once confessed that Presley was uneasy talking about how much his music came from black culture. He'd rather call it original, something uniquely his, instead of admitting how deeply his rhythm, gospel roots, and vocal phrasing were drawn straight from the Black South. Even blues legend B.B. King spoke about it carefully. He said Elvis was always polite in person, but that he kept his distance. He never wanted to be seen too close with us in public, B.B. hinted, suggesting Elvis feared it might damage his image with white audiences. It was respect in private, silence in public. Little Richard didn't hold back, though. In interviews, he said Elvis copied everything, the moves, the shouting, the way I worked the crowd. Richard said he took it all and called it his own. To him, Elvis had built a kingdom out of black creativity while keeping the real kings and queens locked outside the castle gates. Even at home in Graceland, that separation never went away. Former staff described an invisible line between who belonged in the spotlight and who stayed behind the scenes. His close circle was almost entirely white, and black employees were kept in service roles, working for him but never beside him. They weren't invited to social gatherings, business meetings, or family dinners. The divide was quiet, but undeniable. And the same cold distance showed up backstage on the Ed Sullivan Show. Crew members from all three of his appearances remembered that Elvis avoided interacting with black stagehands or technicians. One longtime stage manager recalled, he stuck with the white crew. He was polite, but distant, like he didn't know how to act around anyone else. For a production that had become one of the most integrated in television, his behavior stood out, and not in a good way. What made it all worse was the timing. Elvis rose to superstardom right in the middle of the civil rights movement. The Montgomery bus boycott, the integration battles in Little Rock, the freedom rides. It was all happening while he was becoming America's biggest idol. He had the power to shape how millions of young white fans thought about race, fairness, and equality. But he stayed completely silent. He never spoke up, never lent his voice to justice, and never used his fame to acknowledge where his music truly came from. He just kept dancing, smiling, and collecting the praise for a sound built from someone else's struggle. At first, Sullivan didn't think much about it. Back in the 1950s, he was focused on ratings, headlines, and keeping up with America's wild new music craze. Elvis was good business, controversial, magnetic, and guaranteed to pull in millions of viewers. But by the 1960s, as Ed started pushing for more inclusivity and giving black performers the recognition they deserved, his view began to shift. He started to see what his show had helped create, a superstar who benefited from black genius but gave nothing back. His wife, Sylvia, later shared how those thoughts haunted him. She said Ed would watch civil rights coverage on television, sit-ins, marches, speeches, and when Elvis appeared on the screen, he'd shake his head and say, "I made him America's idol, and he never once used that influence for good." That regret stayed with him for the rest of his life. Ed Sullivan had given Elvis one of the biggest platforms in entertainment history, a stage that could have been used to unite, to acknowledge, to give back. But Elvis used it only to glorify himself. According to NBC insiders, Elvis even pushed back against having black dancers featured in parts of his 1968 comeback special. He wanted the scenes segregated, keeping black and white performers apart on screen. Even at the height of his fame, his mindset hadn't changed. In his later years, Ed Sullivan often replayed that decision in his mind. Booking Elvis had seemed harmless, just another performance, but he came to see it differently. "I thought I was just booking a singer," he once said. "I didn't realize I was crowning a king who ruled over stolen territory." The irony was brutal. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, built his throne on black rhythm, black creativity, and black genius, yet never stood beside the people who gave that art to the world. Ed had handed him the crown, and it haunted him for life. Elvis died in 1977, just 3 years after Sullivan. The tributes called him a legend, but few mentioned the contradictions, the way he profited from black innovation while keeping his distance from black people. Those truths got buried beneath the myth, But Ed's regret wasn't only about Elvis, it was about every star who used his stage to rise while quietly reinforcing division. Pat Boone's theft, Kate Smith's racist songs, Perry Como's quiet exclusion, Lawrence Welk's traditional orchestra, Sophie Tucker's blackface, the Rolling Stones' hypocrisy, Judy Garland's slurs, Gene Autry's segregation, and Elvis's stolen sound. All of it played out under Sullivan's spotlight, shaping how America saw race, fame, and morality. He couldn't take those broadcasts back, but in his final years, he understood the price of fame, the applause that often hides the truth. So, what do you think? Which revelation shocked you most? Did you already know how deep the racism in entertainment's golden age really ran? If this deep dive opened your eyes, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories from the hidden side of entertainment history. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.